Hey guys, today I'm going to be ranking all of the Lord Peter Wimsey novels written by Dorothy L. Sayers from worst to best. So to lay the ground rules, I'm only going to be ranking the full-length novels written by Dorothy L. Sayers. I'm not going to be counting the short stories, and I'm not going to be counting any of the continuation novels by Joe Peyton Walsh. These are the 11 full-length novels written between 1923 and 1937. And because this is Dorothy L. Sayers, I think all of the ones on this list are still going to be enjoyable, and even the worst ranked book is still going to be kind of fun to read. But if you only have time to read one or two, I'm hoping this list can give you an idea of what is the best of Sayers, as opposed to what is merely the very good. This is going to be a half subjective, half objective ranking. I personally really like Sayers, and I'm going to be expressing what I think are my favorites, but I'm also going to be referring to the consensus opinions and considering these novels based on objective criteria to the extent such things exist, like plot, characterization, setting, theme, etc. So there are 11 novels here. I'm going to try to keep this concise. Let's get into it. Number 11, Whose Body? This is Dorothy L. Sayers' first novel and her first novel starring Lord Peter, and as such, she's still kind of developing Lord Peter's character and building out his world. And because this is her first novel, she didn't try anything too wacky or out of the box. It's kind of a straightforward mystery, and that's why it's ranked at the bottom of this list. Lord Peter is introduced here, his butler, Bunter, is introduced, Charles Parker is introduced. These characters will reoccur throughout the series. However, a lot of the other parts of Lord Peter's life haven't really been developed or imagined yet, so I don't think it really showcases the best of Dorothy L. Sayers. Lord Peter is at his most silly and fatuous in this book. That can be funny and a joy to read, but it can also appear somewhat two-dimensional. He's kind of a Scarlet Pimpernel kind of character. So overall, Whose Body is a good introduction to Lord Peter's character and his world, and it's a solid mystery, but it's nothing too special. Number 10, Five Red Herrings. This is the sixth novel, published in 1931, and by this time Lord Peter's world is a little bit more fleshed out, but you don't really feel it in this book because it takes place away from that familiar London milieu. This book takes place in Scotland, where Lord Peter and Bunter have gone on a vacation, and they are socializing with the local artists and the fishermen, one of whom ends up dead, and Lord Peter has to investigate. So there are 6 suspects, and that means there are 5 red herrings. The reason why I rank this book so low is because it feels very rote. It feels like a traditional whodunit mystery. I don't think Sayers was trying to break any barriers with this book. There are times where it feels like Sayers is just hitting those beats as a mystery writer. There's extensive discussion of railway timetables and squaring up this person's alibi against these real-world railway timetables. That can sometimes be good for the sense of place and the sense of setting, but it can also feel like the narrative will drag during those passages. There's also a memorable part at the beginning of this book where the narrator withholds a key piece of information from you. Lord Peter Wimsey is investigating this corpse, and he discovers that something's not there, and he doesn't tell you what that is. And that doesn't feel like quite great writing to me. It just takes me out of the immersion. Number 9, Busman's Honeymoon. This is a fan favorite for many because it takes place immediately after the happily ever after of Gaudy Night. Peter and Harriet have just gotten married, and they are going off on their honeymoon, and the beginning of this book is a treat for fans of the romance and fans of Harriet Vane and Peter Wimsey together. Busman's Honeymoon is the only novel where these two characters can be together as a couple unabashedly, and that's because they just got married. So Peter and Harriet go off to this house that Peter has bought for Harriet as a wedding present, and they find a dead body there, and they have to solve the mystery together. Many parts of this book are delightful to read. There is a lovely competition of quotations between Peter and the police inspector in this book. It's kind of a treat for the reader where you can try to guess what the references are to. And there are also many touching and sensitive interactions between Peter and Harriet, how they're settling into life as a newlywed couple. If you are into romance, I think Busman's Honeymoon is a must-read. However, that being said, I think you really do need to read Gaudy Night before in order to understand the relationship. The book kind of presumes that you already know what the relationship between these two characters are. And in terms of broad themes, I don't think Busman's Honeymoon tries to do as much as Gaudy Night did. I think Sayers really said most of all she wanted to say about marriage and the woman question in Gaudy Night, so Busman's Honeymoon doesn't really address any of those big themes because they've already been addressed. Overall, this book is a great bonus for the fan, but I don't think it's essential. Number 8, Have His Carcase. This book was published in 1932, and it is the novel immediately after Five Red Herrings. It is a fan favorite, and I like this book a lot, but it doesn't break into the top 5 for me because for me, this book is just the middle act in this great triptych between Strong Poison and Gaudy Night. Those 3 books together form more than the sum of their parts, and the middle act, Have His Carcase, kind of presumes that you've read Strong Poison, and after you read Have His Carcase, you'll kind of want to read Gaudy Night, so I don't think it really stands on its own. That being said, there are some hilarious and memorable scenes of this book. The plot revolves around Harriet going on a solo walking tour, and she stumbles upon a body on a beach. She puts up at the local watering hole, and Peter comes along to investigate as well. The opening of this book is, I think, the strongest. This is the first time you get a point of view that isn't Lord Peter Wimsey. The way Harriet approaches a crime and what she does at the beginning is fascinating and very exciting. Also exciting are the scenes where Harriet and Peter are trying to solve this crime together. This is the novel where the two of them get to both put on their detective hats, and you get to see a little bit of this equality developing between these characters. However, I think Have His Carcase suffers from the same sort of rote mystery beats as Five Red Herrings. There is another extensive chapter devoted to deciphering the Playfair cipher, which Sayers clearly knew a ton about and really wanted to take you along step by step as Peter and Harriet solve this ciphered letter. However, it grinds the narrative to a halt, and it feels like it's just a means to get from point A to point B. So overall, a necessary step if you're into the romance arc, but probably not the best of Sayers. Number 7, Unnatural Death. This is the 3rd book in the series, and I think one of the ones that stands out as a great mystery. The plot is Lord Peter and Charles Parker are discussing murders that no one even knows are murders, and somebody sitting next to them overhears and says, "I had one of those. I'm a doctor. One of my patients was sick and old and she died suddenly, and I thought something was suspicious, but I didn't want to raise a ruckus." And Peter's like, "I'm going to investigate that even though nobody asked me to." This is one of those books where Dorothy L. Sayers shines as a plotter, as an action writer. There's a lot of riveting action in this novel, and things get worse before they get better. But she's able to create suspense even though there's not a plethora of suspects, and it's more about the how was it done rather than the who done it. One of the points that makes this book stand out is Miss Clemson. She is introduced in this novel as a side character, and she will appear in a couple of subsequent novels. She is an elderly, unmarried lady that Lord Peter employs as a private investigator, basically. Through the figure of Catherine Clemson, Sayers is able to inject some social commentary and discuss the role of women and what they can contribute to society in the world of England between the wars. This is also one of the novels where Peter questions his life purpose, and it provides a lot more characterization for Peter. Because he is a gentleman, and because this crime isn't exactly one that cries out to heaven for vengeance, because it's an old lady and she was probably going to die anyway, Peter really has to question himself as to why am I investigating at all. He has to reckon with the effects of his meddling. So for the exploration of Peter's character and the social commentary, this one is a great Sayers novel. Number 7, Clouds of Witness. This is a great book, and it is the 2nd book in the series, already so much better than the first. This book introduces Lord Peter's family, so that's his brother, his sister, his mother, his sister's fiancé, his brother's wife, friends of the family, lawyers, and of course Charles Parker. Charles Parker gets introduced to all of them in this novel. The setting is Riddlesdale Lodge, so this is sort of Sayers' take on that classic mystery trope, the closed house mystery. All of the characters are in this great house for hunting season, a murder occurs, and the suspects are all members of that household. However, unlike a traditional Great House mystery, all of the characters basically in this novel are going to be continuing recurring characters that you'll see in the subsequent novels. So rather than just having a group of randos, it feels like you're getting to know people who matter to Lord Peter's world. One reason why I like this novel is not just because it explores Lord Peter's background, but it contrasts that world of the gentry, the world of the lords, versus the world of the commoners, and examples of that crop up in pivotal points throughout the story. You obviously have Charles Parker, who is a symbol of the common man, but you have other characters too, including one character who is a leftist communist, which is another avenue for Sayers to interject some of her social commentary. This novel's also got solid storytelling. It's very intricately plotted, and many strands of narrative coalesce together at the end. There is a lot of action and actually pretty suspenseful sequences in this novel. The writing is impeccable, and this was only her second book, so I am very fond of this novel. I think it's a solid book. Top 5! Everything from here on out is cream of the crop, and we'll start off with a banger, Gaudy Night. So this is a perennial favorite, and I love Gaudy Night. Why don't I rank it higher? I think it's the same reason why I don't rank His Carcase higher. You kind of need to have the previous novel to understand the context of the relationship between the characters in this novel. And that's because this is a Harriet and Peter novel. The plot is Harriet is called to Oxford to investigate a series of disturbances, not rising to murders yet, but people are getting anonymous letters on campus, robes are being burnt in effigy, someone's just making trouble, and she's called on independently to investigate. Peter doesn't show up until at least halfway through. The first half of this book is pure Harriet, and this is really where the book shines, I think. Sayers allows herself to address, through the actions and discussions of the professors and Harriet on campus, some of the big questions that concerned her in real life. These are questions of the role of women in society. What does an ideal marriage look like? Can a woman have both a career and a family? And what is the role of work in one's life purpose? I think Sayers put a lot of her own life experience into this, and it really shows. The level of care and attention to detail in this book is unparalleled. The descriptions of Oxford in and of themselves are breathtaking. However, I also think that the discussion of these themes is one of the ways that this novel shows its age. So these questions of can a woman be both a professional and a wife are not really things that we discuss today, because you kind of take it for granted that women can have both. So sometimes when they talk about this topic, for a modern reader, it can appear a little too antiquated, a little belabored, a little obvious. The world has changed a lot since 1935, and some of it may not be as relevant today. Nevertheless, the exuberance of this book shines through, and I love it personally. Number 4, The Unpleasantness at the Bellona Club. Okay, it's kind of a mouthful, but I love The Unpleasantness at the Bellona Club. This is the 4th novel in the series, and Sayers is really hitting her stride here. You get the sense that she's not afraid to show us the flavor of the times and discuss some of the controversial topics of the day. The controversial topic here is basically shell-shocked veterans of World War I. This novel takes place in and around the Bellona Club, which is a veterans club in London. One of the elderly members of the club winds up dead, and Peter, who is also a member, is called in to investigate. I love the sense of time and place in this novel. It is sort of a window into 1920s England. You get the spectrum of people's reactions to veterans of World War I. You have people who are a little bit older, who are more conservative and less sympathetic to victims of shell shock, for example. And then you have people who are in the war, who are sympathetic and know how hard it is to recover from that experience. You also have some pretty controversial contemporary issues, like men who are unable to care for themselves and have to rely on their wives or their other family for assistance because they are still suffering from the mental after effects or even the physical effects of World War I. You also get a look at this other set of people that Sayers would have been familiar with, which is the Bloomsbury artist set. Lord Peter spends some time with Marjorie Phelps, a sculptor in that milieu in this novel, and it is just a fascinating little look at what that society would have been like. I think the Unpleasantness at the Bellona Club is underrated, and I really appreciate its depiction of interwar London. All right, we are into our top three. Woo, okay, so number three is Murder Must Advertise. This one is a favorite. Everyone loves it, and deservedly so. It is so unique amongst mystery novels of the period because it takes place in an office. Literally an office. Peter goes undercover as a workaday salaryman, as a copywriter in this advertising agency. He's there to investigate the death of a previous copywriter who fell down the stairs in the office. Sayers worked in an ad agency as a copywriter herself, so she is able to paint the details of that environment in a true-to-life way, including the clashing personalities, the petty squabbles, and the modern phenomenon that is advertising itself. Peter is a fish out of water. He's never had to work a day in his life, so now he has to pretend to be your average Joe. This part of the book shines with brilliancy, with wit, with something that you just won't find in any other mystery of the period. The second half of this book is the world of the bright young things, which is equally fascinating, although perhaps a bit less true to life because Sayers wasn't actually part of that set herself, although it is something she would have been familiar with. This part of the book involves Peter going undercover again as a sort of debonair and dashing harlequin figure in the masquerade balls of the bright young things. There is a drug smuggling conspiracy going on. There is action. The pacing of this book sometimes is a little weird because it switches back and forth between these two worlds, but just for the uniqueness of it, the sheer imaginativeness of this book deserves to be up there amongst all of the mysteries of this period. And I just found out that Vladimir Nabokov himself, who praised Sayers' writing, recommended Murder Must Advertise to Edmund Wilson, that critic who denigrated the entire genre of detective fiction in his essay, Who Cares Who Killed Roger Ackroyd? As if we need any more evidence that Nabby has good taste. Okay, number two, we are down to the top two now. Number two is Strong Poison. Everyone loves it. You knew it'd be up here. This is the book that introduces Harriet Vane, Peter's love interest. She is introduced as a prisoner in the dock. She is accused of the murder of her ex-boyfriend, whom she was cohabitating with, which is kind of a scandal. Peter sees her, falls in love with her, and resolves to defend her. The reason why I love Strong Poison is because it challenges Peter as a person and as a detective. He has never really been vulnerable before this point in the series. First of all, he falls in love, which is a vulnerability. And then second of all, this novel challenges his detective skills. The case is pretty watertight. It's one of those classic mysteries where it seems as if there's no way that anybody but Harriet could have done the mystery. So the way he unravels and solves the case is just a very unique and golden age kind of solution that you just have to read. However, before he solves the case, he has a serious moment of doubt. There is a moment where he thinks about smashing his own reflection in the mirror, but then he sort of pulls himself together, remembers himself, and goes on a tour de force of action that is exhilarating to read. Dorothy Sayers really tried her hardest with this one, and it shows. It is a masterpiece, and were it not for number one on this list, it would probably be her best. All right, number one. I'm so excited. Thanks for following along so far. By process of elimination, number one is The Nine Tailors. I love The Nine Tailors. I'm so excited to talk about it. It is in The Nine Tailors that Dorothy L. Sayers explores some of the most ambitious themes that she cares about. These are themes of fate, justice, divine providence, the weight of the past, and being at the whim of forces that are much greater than any individual. While a lot of mysteries deal with a particular set of facts in a particular time and place, I think Dorothy L. Sayers tries in The Nine Tailors to create a universal story. The story revolves around a small town where Peter and Bunter have a car accident. They put up at the local rector's house, and it turns out the local rector is really into change ringing, which is a kind of bell ringing. When one of the local bell ringers is sick that night, Lord Peter subs in. Throughout the Nine Tailors, Sayers makes you feel the presence of these bells, which are these grandiose, gigantic, mute, old objects that nevertheless seem to have a knowledge beyond that of human understanding. They are the symbol of God and justice in this book. And Sayers was very religious herself, and I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I really admire her for not shying away from these big themes in her work. This comes through especially in the dramatic final act of this novel, where there's a huge flood that inundates the surrounding landscape and this town. Both you as the reader and Peter are made to feel insignificant in this landscape where acts of God and force majeure can destroy innocent lives in an instant. I also love the Nine Tailors because this is really Peter's final form, so to speak. The next two novels, Gaudy Night and Busman's Honeymoon, are really a him and Harriet story. This is the last time we see him on his own. By this point in the series, he's developed into a fully fleshed out human being, and combined with the grand themes of fate that this novel has, he's reckoning with his past and his chosen role in society. I just love this look at an adult Peter Wimsey. The last thing that I will say about the Nine Tailors is that the characterization of the villagers in this little town is adorable, especially the figure of the rector. It's clear that Sayers is drawing on her own background as the daughter of a Church of England rector in painting a loving portrait of a truly kind and good-hearted old man. Alright, this is the final list of Lord Peter Wimsey novels ranked from 1 to 11. I would say that anything ranked 5 or above are must-reads if you're a fan of the mystery genre, and there are several books in here that have themes that extend beyond the mystery genre and would be relevant for any lover of literature. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my rankings on this list, and until next time.